once again to Tech Journey. So in this tutorial we will talk about promise in JavaScript. So in a JavaScript programming language, promise is a very important subject or topic that we need to understand. So when it comes for the definition of promise, right? So promise is actually a very important building blocks to manage the asynchronous execution. So to understand the promise or to understand the definition of promise, we need to know that why we need to use a promise and why the promise came in picture in JavaScript. Promise, in terms of English word, it's a very promising word, or the meaning of promise is like you are giving some promise to someone. But in case of JavaScript, it's a very different meaning, and most of the people don't understand about the promise, and they don't understand that why we need to use a promise. They just write the program in by using promise. So to understand the promise, beforehand we need to understand one thing, that what is the synchronous execution and what is the asynchronous execution in JavaScript. So that is the main and most important thing, and from there only the promise is actually introduced, right? So let's jump into dive into the code and let's see what is the synchronous execution. So by default, JavaScript is a synchronous programming language, right? Synchronous programming language means it's nothing but it will execute the program line by line basis. Just I'm just repeating the word again, that it will execute the program line by line basis. For example, if you're giving a console.log and I'm giving in here first, and in the second console log I'm giving second. So you can see, so the first console log has been printed, and in the second number line the second console log has been printed. For example, if I print console.log third, right? So this is nothing but we're executing the program line by line. It does not mean that the 9 number line executed first and then the 8 number line executed the middle, right? So it will go on top to bottom JavaScript program. But what is a problem happen, right? Like, is there any problem happen in the second line, right? Then what will happen? It will pass the control to the 10 number line. Is it? Let's see. For example, we give a variable p in here, and you can see we're getting an error. Just no, just save it. Okay, and probably we'll use kind of, right. See, so I'm just defining one thing in here. Try to defining one thing. Like when you're actually getting an error in the 9 number line, the 10 number line is not executed. So it means that it is also proved that in JavaScript, if you have any error in any one of the line, the next line will not be executed. If you have the error in the previous number of line, right, then the next line would not be executed, and from the next line onwards, whatever the statements you have written for JavaScript, that won't be executed, right? So this is a very basic building blocks of synchronous execution. So then what is the asynchronous execution? Asynchronous execution is just the opposite of the synchronous execution. It's nothing but it's just the opposite. In the synchronous, you have a synchronous. In asynchronous, you have and the suffix as a mean that is just the opposite of the synchronous. So what I mean in here, that when the JavaScript executed line by line, right, it means a synchronous execution. So the opposite will be the when the JavaScript statement will not executed line by line basis, then it is called as asynchronous execution. For example, let's see, we have a set timeout, and we are using this console.log in this statement, okay? And you can see right now, uh, the first number line is executed, the 8 number line, line number 8 executed, then immediately the 12 number line is executed, but this line didn't execute. So what is happening in here? So this 8 number line is a synchronous block. Synchronous block, it means that the synchronous execution is happening to the synchronous block. When it is coming to the set timeout, the 9 number line, right, it is not a synchronous block. It is just a purely asynchronous block, right? So what will happen in the asynchronous block? So as I mentioned, the synchronous execution, it will execute line by line. But when it see that in the 8 number line you have a synchronous console log, after that whenever it will see a set timeout, it knows JavaScript that it is an asynchronous block, so it will not wait for the response whatever we are getting from the console log. Even though if you are giving 100 millisecond also, it will not wait for 100 millisecond, right? It will immediately pass the control, or even if you are using 0, it will immediately pass the control to the next line. It will not wait for the response from the asynchronous block. It will pass the control to the next line, to the 12 number line. If it in the 12 number line we also have a asynchronous block, then again that asynchronous block control will pass to the another next line. But right now in the 12th number line of code, we have the synchronous block is available. That's why the console log will be printed in here. So it's very clear that the first console log is printed, the console log first, and the third, but the second it didn't print it because we have error. So this is just a asynchronous block. So right now I've just given enter in here, and I'm giving an enter in here. So to manage this asynchronous block, right, to manage this asynchronous execution, you don't know when you will get the response, right? But you need to get the response at certain time. So how you will get the response after 1000 millisecond, right? You don't have any way to get the response at 1000 millisecond. So to get the response at 1000 millisecond, you need to manage the asynchronous execution to get the response. And there are various ways you can manage the execution of asynchronous block, right? Or execution. And some of the ways are callback, promises, and observable. So nowadays mostly we are using the promises. We can also use the callback, but there is a problem of callback hell. We'll discuss in some another video about the callback hell. But and in this chapter we'll talk about the promise, and also there is the observable is also there, which will also manage the asynchronous execution, but it has a lot of benefit of using it. It can provide real-time data and stream of data, and also it can manage the various operators as well. But in this video we'll just stick to the promise. We'll give you a detailed explanation and very in detail and very basic way to understand the promise, so that you will never forget in a very in a future, right? We'll give a very pictorial way to define it. So this is asynchronous block. So right now we need to manage the asynchronous block. We need to get the result of console log to some extent, right? So right now we'll just remove this statement from here, and let's write a promise to get the data. So instead of this one, what we'll do in here, uh, so first of all, the promise is written in this way. So we have a promise, for example, we have a promise, and that has a new, and it has a promise constructor function, right? And it will take two parameters. One is resolve and another one is reject. We are using TypeScript, so we are getting some type error, although we'll just remove this type error. Okay. So right now, we'll use a set timeout in here. Just cut it and we'll just paste it in here. So you can see that we have a set timeout, right? So instead of console.log, we'll get the result. So right now we will, what we'll use in here, we will actually write some logic that if like we'll use that a variable like const, uh, we'll write something like topic category equal to technology. So based on the category, we will decide whether we need to get the success value or the error value. So we'll talk about the resolve and reject, step by step, so you'll understand. We'll just write some program in here, and then we'll talk about the okay. So basically, we have 100 millisecond of 1000 milliseconds of timer we have given in the set timeout. So as I mentioned, it is an asynchronous block, and we want to get the result from the asynchronous block, right? Using promise. So right now we have a two cases, edge cases are there. One is a success, another is a error. Again, I'm repeating, one is a success, another is a error. To manage a success case, right, we have a resolve, and to manage a reject case, sorry, to manage a error case, right, we have a reject function. So both of these two are functions, right? So resolve is a function which will actually take a parameter where you can pass the success value, and reject will take the parameter where you can pass the error value, right? So right now we'll take the resolve in here, and then we'll pass the success value, whatever the value we'll have in here, and that is category. And if we have reject, right, then we have the category. Again, we are printing it. So we just written a promise. So right now, when this set timeout will call, right, then by using this promise, whatever promise you have created, using this promise, you can access the value of success or error, right? So how we're going to do it? Let's write the type of the promise as well, as we are using promise in here. So it will use a string, okay, and we will actually call the promise in here. So to call a promise, we need to use a promise, what promise we have created using the promise constructor function, and then we can use the then block, okay. So in the then block, we'll get the data, whatever the response, we'll get it, right? Console dot log of data, right? Or else we'll write error console dot log of error. So you can see that the technology has been printed after after 1 millisecond, right? Similarly, if I change it to 0, it will be immediately printed. You can see, I think it is printed automatically, it is just formatted. So for the sake of visually understanding, we just change the time to 1000 millisecond, right? And you can see in here the cache block is printed in here. So you can see the technology has been printed after 1000 millisecond. So it means that that by using set timeout we cannot get the value, right, because the immediately the execution passed to the next control, right? We didn't get the result, right? The immediately next line has been executed, but if we need to get the response or the error value, right, then we can create a promise in this way for any asynchronous execution, right? And we can get the success or the error value in this way. So right now, for example, if I change the value to technology 2, maybe in e-commerce. Okay, okay, so we'll use string here. Yeah, so basically when we use e-commerce, right, then the the e-commerce has been printed, but we don't know whether it's a error or success, all right. So we'll write in here e-commerce, you know we'll also write in here as this e-commerce has an error. E-commerce, maybe we'll just use a prefix in here. What we'll do in here, we'll just write a prefix error, and in here we'll write a success. Okay, so we are getting error, right, in here. Similarly, if I use technology, right, then we'll get a success in here, correct. So it means that based on the resolve or reject, right, we can get the success or error value in the then and catch block, right. So right now we're just passing the value inside the promise, right, using hard-coded values. Why not if you make it as a reusable function, right? So let's wrap this thing as a function, right? Okay. So let's write this thing const promise equal to not write a promise, we'll just write some simple another way. For example, we have write, so we'll write a function uh, like get data. We'll give a category in here, right, and this will be a promise. As it a function, we'll just wrap it in a function, and then we'll use this variable inside in here. Okay, so instead of this category, we'll pass this category only, whatever the category you want to pass. So instead of this promise, right, we'll have to use this category, right, technology maybe, and then it will return a promise. So promise of string, as you're returning a string, so it will be a string, right, but you need to also return it. Okay, yeah, so you can see that we have just converted this thing as a promise, as a function, right, get data, and we are passing the category technology, and then we are using that then block to get the data success. For example, instead of technology, if you are pass any like real estate, then we'll get the error, right. So it's a very simple, we can manage the promise, right. But there are also other stuff we can do it using promise. For example, if you have a chain of promise and you want to call the promise parallelly, right, if you have a multiple promise and you want to call the promises parallelly, for example, if you have different types of data like category data, okay, then um, then you have function get product data, right. So same thing, you're just doing it in here. You have two kind of promises are here, right, okay, and you're just writing a promise the same way, right. So you're getting two data, one is product data and one is the category data, right. So for product data, you will use a product, what product name you want to give, right? So maybe the product is mobile, right? You will get product success, or else it will be an error. If it is a mobile, then you will get a success, either you will get an error. So right now you have two kind of promises are available, right? So immediately whenever it will pass the block, right, the get category or product data will be called, right? You can call these things separately. For example, if you have this thing category data, right, you can get the real estate error, right? Similarly, if you get the, for example, your product is maybe mug, right? Maybe your television, maybe you are using TV, right? If your product is TV, right, then you will get an error, TV has an error, right? Okay. So TV has an error, right? Success. So you have some error in here because you passed the TV. If you pass the mobile, you will not get an error, get a success. So for example, these two lines are not executed at the same time. Once this line executed, immediately it will pass the control to this line, but still there is a time gap. So it means that the promise will not, these two promises are not executed at same time. First the get category that executed, then the get product that executed. So sometimes it happens that we want to execute the both two promises at the same time, right? And it is called as a parallel calling, right? It means that two line has started from the same starting point, right, or from the same time, right? So that is called, it is called parallel calling, right? So to do the parallel calling, we have a way to do it, and that is called promise dot all. And in here we can pass these promises as an array. Okay, so first of all we will pass this function, this is a promise, right? Another, we will pass another function, this is an the get product data function. So these two promise we need to pass as an array, so that is the syntax. If you see in here, this function the all will take a array of promises, right? So right now to get the data, it's the same, that we need to use a then block, right? And just remove this thing, and we'll use the data, and data is nothing but a string, right? And we'll just use it's not a string actually, we'll write a string of array, right? Console.log of data, and in here it will take the catch, it will give an error if you have some error. Okay, so in here you can see that we are getting an error in the real estate, because we have an error in the real estate because we pass the real estate as a category name. Instead of real estate, if you pass the technology, you will get the success, right? So right now, for one promise, if the one promise is failed, the entire promise execution is failed, and we'll get the failed result as you have seen in the last call, right? But in here, if the both two promises return the success response, right, then we'll get the success value as an array. As both are returning a string, so that's why we have given data as a, you can also write this way, it's a string. So I hope you understand that what is called a parallel calling in promise. It's a very vital question. Most of the time you will get this question in the interview call. So this is nothing but a parallel calling. You can just combine those call in one call, and once the entire execution done from all of the calls, right, then you will get the result, whether it's success block or in the error block, depend on your each promise execution, right? So right now we just talk about the parallel execution. Then there is another way we can also call it promise. So we can call the promise using then and catch block, as we have shown to you, right, using the success and the error block. But still there is another way we can call the promise, and that is called async await. Okay, so let's see one example of async await. So for example, we have get category data, right? And we want to call this get category data as an async await using promise, right? So to do that, what we need to do in here, we need to use a function, right? Okay, so it will return a promise. So for example, if we are using this as a function, right? So if we write a function that, okay, uh, get data, if you want to get the data, right, then you can just write a function in here, and as it is returning a promise, right, so what we can do in here, we can use async await. See, in async await is nothing but it will use a keyword, right, in here. Before function will write async. Okay, we'll write a function async. So before the function we need to write the async in this way, right? And then we need to use the get the data, right? Const category, right? And then we use a await get category, and in here we need to pass some the success value, the technology. So we'll get the success value. So right now most of the people, what they will do it, they will just console log it in here, and they will try to see the category in the console log, whether it's printed or not, because you're just awaiting this uh, promise, right, using async await. I mean, you're just holding the execution and wait for the result, and once the result has came, it will be stored in the category variable, right? But you can still see that we are not getting the value in here. So that's why the most of the people didn't know that what is wrong they're doing it, right? You will not get this thing in and directly in this block, right? Because it is going to the main thread, right? And to get the data you need to use a try catch block. So likewise we are using then block, right? In the then block we have so in the then block we have the success result. Similarly, in the try block we have a success result, and in the catch block we will get the error data. But we need to use the try catch block to get the category data, otherwise it will be not printed at the immediate line, because it will treat this previous line as a synchronous line, right? So for example, if I use the console.log of category, right, we need to use async in here also. So basically it will return a promise. Okay, so it is just not showing me the result in here. Oh, sorry, my bad. I didn't call the function. Okay, so in here we didn't call the function. I'm expecting that we'll get the result, but that should not happen actually. So basically, you can see that when you call the function, right, we're getting the result. So we don't need to pass async in here. You know, only need to pass the async in this function. Okay, because you need to use the await. So await you can use only in this function where you can pass the async at the previous function. If you are using a function, await you can use on top of any function. So use await, you need to wrap the promise inside a function, and that function should have a async keyword before the function. Then you can use the async await. So once you'll get the category, right, you can see that you are getting the category in here, right, and the error will be given in here only. So this is the error, right? So nothing has been printed in the error, but if we just go outside of the try catch block, and if you just print, you know, console.log of result, right, the result will be printed at first if you see in here. Okay, so I'm just calling again this get data, right, calling the get data again. So you can see in here the line by line the execution is happening. Okay, first it is executing the technology success, then it is actually executing the result. Okay, so in this way it will actually work the async await, right? You can see, so for example, if instead of technology if I pass book, right, then it will throw me an error, book error, right, and in the catch block. So this is a very simple way. I just mentioned you about async and await and how we can do the promise call, right, using then and catch block, how to create a promise, and how to use the try catch block to get the result, right. So this is a very bare minimum and basic way to create the promises. So I hope you get the understanding from this video, and if you need to understand more in JavaScript and more in some another topic in JavaScript, just subscribe in our channel. We'll just going to release the new videos in the upcoming sessions, and we'll talk about the new feature of JavaScript, not only from JavaScript but from other frameworks as well, right. So you'll get an idea, but we'll talk about everything in detail in a very pictorial, in a very simple way, so that you can clearly understand the point. So thank you guys for your time. Bye bye.